Thank you, Will, and good evening, everyone. I'm Angela Apostle, Council's Director Corporate. I will take us through the first part of the presentation, which highlights some of Council's financial and asset management challenges. I'll give you comparison of how Council sits against other councils, comparable council, in terms of rating information as well as expenditure. Then I'll pass it over to Peter Leisha, our Director Operations. So for many years, our council has been in good financial health. We managed to deliver operating surpluses for many years. However, currently we are into an unsustainable financial situation, and if we do nothing or don't take any measures, we will be deteriorating in future. So there are some factors that contribute to that, and one of those is rising costs. So for a number of years, inflation and high demand, increasing expenses. This is above what our rates revenue was, and due to rate pegging. Now, cost shifting, and I'll go more in detail into this. Cost shifting is more responsibility coming out from state and federal government without equivalent funding. The rate system disadvantages. So our rates peg system has been set up in many years ago, 1970, and our council's total rates per capita is below the Sydney average, which highlights some of the issues that we currently have. On top of that, we have aging infrastructure, and we have a growing need for maintenance and renewal in future. This has been deteriorating over many years due to the fact that, as I said, in 1970 we had the rate peg system, which didn't allow councils to raise additional revenue to cover costs, and this is an issue that many councils, if not all, face in New South Wales. Another major cost driver was our extreme weather. So we've seen increasing costs in terms of storms, flooding, and others. These challenges have led to our council position deteriorating, and we need to do something to address that. So what is rate pegging? Rate pegging, so currently council raises revenue from different sources. About 50% is coming from council's rates. Other funding sources are domestic waste charges, other fees and charges, grants, and interest income, and others. I mentioned the rate peg. The rate peg is set up by IPART through the minister on an annual basis. This is a cap that's applied on our total rates income, and this applies to all councils in New South Wales. So the rate peg limits how much council can increase and can raise in overall revenue, and the rate peg applies to council's overall revenue and not individual ratepayer bills. Historically, as I mentioned, the rate peg has been lower than the increase in costs, and that's why we see currently a gap, and which deteriorates further. IPART has identified an issue, however, that's a bit late, and in 2022 they reviewed the rate peg methodology to better account for council cost increases and population growth. Over the last 10 years, but obviously further, this is the 10 years analysis that we've done, our operating expenses have increased by 40%, while the rates revenue that we raised increased only by 28%. I must say this is just operating expenses. We haven't included here the capital expenditure, and that's gone even further because most capital works expenditure would go higher than CPI. Cost shifting is another cost driver in local government. So this council estimates that it needs around $20 million each year to meet the cost imposed by other levels of government, which is state and federal. And the main sources of this expenditure come from a waste levy. We also have capped development assessment fees, so we can't fully recover the costs incurred on DA assessments. Council is required to pay more in mandatory pensioner rebates, and funding is only half of that initiative. We also pay a high emergency services levy. The next slides compare Ku-ring-gai councils to other metropolitan Sydney councils, and the next ones relate to rating information. So this slides provides an average residential rate per assessment. So In Ku-ring-gai, the average residential rate per assessment is above the Sydney average by about 13%, but it's below comparable councils with higher land values. And one reason for what, or there are a number of reasons. One reason is that in Ku-ring-gai, the value of land is a lot higher. There are larger blocks of land, and we'll see some comparison in next slides. And also Ku-ring-gai raises far lower business rates than other comparable councils. In terms of business rates, we actually collect a lot less, so it's about 35% less. So Ku-ring-gai has only 1,500 businesses. That's a lot lower than comparable councils, but also metropolitan councils. I mentioned that land value in Ku-ring-gai is very high. The rates are calculated are based on land value, unimproved land value. So a house or a block of a building is not accounted as so in Ku-ring-gai, the average land value per property is above the Sydney average, and this is the fourth highest among comparable councils. So you can see that a land value per property in Ku-ring-gai is about 1.7 million, and this is significantly higher than a metropolitan average of 1.1. While the land is high in value, Ku-ring-gai Council pays as a proportion of land value is well below the Sydney average, and you can see that we are the third lowest relative to the land value, and that's about 3 times lower than Penrith or Campbelltown. Now, what are the key points from this comparative data? So Ku-ring-gai Council has the fourth highest land value among Sydney metropolitan councils, but ranks third lowest in rates charged for each dollar of land value. We also have average land values per property about 1.7 million, which is 56% higher than the Sydney average. Ku-ring-gai average residential rates are only 13% higher than the Sydney average. Land values over the past decade in Ku-ring-gai have tripled, so it's an increase of 240%, but rates revenue only increased by 30%. So this means that council collects far less rates revenue per dollar of land value than most Sydney councils, and there is a mismatch between the wealth in the area and what council collects in rates. Now, the next slides show the revenue that we collect per resident, per capita. So again, you can see that compared to metropolitan councils, we collect per capita 7% below the Sydney average. So what this demonstrates is that we have comparably less capacity compared to most other councils to service the needs of our population. So you can see that we also collect a very low proportion of business rates, as I mentioned before. This demonstrates, so the data here comes from the census, and we've looked at the income, income around Ku-ring-gai Council, and we've identified that on average, the Ku-ring-gai residential ratepayers pay less than 1% on their weekly total household income on residential rates, and Ku-ring-gai was one of the more affordable rates to income ratio in the Sydney area. So some of the key points from the comparison above is that Ku-ring-gai residential rates revenue per capita is about 7% below the Sydney average. Business rates per capita is only $40, which is 68% below Sydney average. This is an indication the council has less capacity, as I mentioned before, and we can't service the needs of our population, but also growing demand and services. Despite higher level values, households in Ku-ring-gai area spend less than 1% of income in rates, and this indicates that residents can afford a modest increase in rates to ensure that our services are maintained and improved. Looking at our expenditure and how does council compare to others in terms of expenditure, and what does council do to contain costs? So there are a few measures of efficiency that other councils use. One is operating expenditure per capita. So we're looking at total operating expenditure the council has over each year, divided by the population. In 23-24, and I must say that this data comes from the Office of Local Government Comparative Data from audited financial statements. It's public information, so it's available for everyone to review. In 23-24, council had an operating expenditure per capita of 16% less than any Sydney average council. And this suggests that we are already delivering our services perhaps more cost effectively than other comparable councils. We also had looked at how our operating expenses have increased over a number of years. And again, the data comes from comparative data. In recent years, and that's about 7 years after certain councils have finalised their amalgamation. So over that period of time, Ku-ring-gai had the 4th lowest average annual increase in operating expenditure. So this is a sign that we have quite strict control on our costs, and we managed to keep the costs down compared to many other councils. Another measure of efficiency is looking at the staff members and the number of staff members and how much population they service. So in 23-24, one staff member of council serviced 309 residents, and this is the second highest in Sydney. So this again suggests that we are quite lean. We have an efficient staffing structure. Each staff member is handling a larger workload, and the organisation is operating perhaps more efficiently than other councils. In terms of what else is council doing, so we have a number of initiatives that we have embarked on, and that's been in place for a number of years now. So other productivity and cost containment include looking at our income. So we look to maximize our income, whether it's from rental properties, and we've reviewed our council properties to generate additional rental income. We're reviewing on an annual basis our fees and charges to make sure that we can recover costs. And we've done a review of our golf course fees. As this is an example. We have also looked at our tennis income and increased usability and managed to increase income. In terms of containing costs, again, overall expenditure and staffing costs are lower than comparable councils, as we said, and we are constantly looking to control our costs. We, by local government legislation, have to have a robust budgeting process in place. So every year we make sure that we balance our budgets, and for a number of years we have now frozen the costs. So we had to do more with less, and that's one measure of containing our costs. We all proactively look for external funding, so we proactively look for any grants that we can get from either federal government or a state government. And we are looking for a continuous improvement. We currently have in place a regular review of our services, and we look to find savings and enhance delivery of that. So understanding the rate increase options, what is a special rate variation? So as I mentioned in my previous slides, we have a cap on our total income. So for us to increase that cap, we need to apply for additional or special rate variation. So a special rate variation enables councils to increase rates income beyond that rate cap. It could be for a specific project, or it could be in general for either financial sustainability of councils or to fix infrastructure, which we are currently doing. The special rate variations are essential for funding various projects, as I mentioned, and one part of going through that process is engaging with community and building a case for a special rate variation. IPART is the body that looks at council's applications and decides or approves whether council is allowed to increase their rates. Since there have been at least 90 special rate variation applications by New South Wales councils over 10 years, so that shows that councils are not able to cover the costs of their services purely by the rates income they get and the rate peg. The SRVs can be temporary or permanent, and the one that we are looking for is a permanent fixed amount added to the rate base once, and I'll explain that further. There are 4 options, as you may be aware. Option 1 is deteriorating infrastructure or declining infrastructure. This is a baseline. This assumes that only the rate peg and the 3% is only an assumed rate peg. It could be less or more depending on IPART's determination. However, that's a base case, and if we do nothing and go with option 1, we will have declined infrastructure and further deterioration in all asset classes. Option 2 is renew infrastructure, so that's a special rate variation of 19%, and on top of our rate peg would give a total increase of 22%. Option 3, renew and enhance infrastructure, so adding additional infrastructure, and that's a 29% total increase. And option 4, it's renew, enhance, and expand infrastructure, 33%. Now, I went very quickly through those because Peter will take you through in detail about what each of these options mean, and as well as the impact to the ratepayer. I did mention that the SRV is, or the special rate variation, is dedicated purely for infrastructure, and it's not for other operating expenses or adding additional staff. So it's purely, the purpose of it is to fund our renewal and maintenance and upgrades to our infrastructure. It's a one-time, if approved, there will be a one-time increase from July 2026, and this will apply from your rates notice in July 2026 and become permanent. Future increases from July onwards, the rates would just increase by the standard rate peg, estimated currently at 3%. I will hand over to Peter Lisha, who is Director of Operations, to take you through the next slides. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela, and welcome everybody. I'm Peter, I'm the Director of Operations, and as Angela said, I'll run through the options that we are proposing and the impact that those various options will have on our various asset classes. So option 1 is an assumed 3% rate increase in line with the rate pegging. So it basically isn't, there's no rate increase above the standard assumed 3%. So on average, $2.3 million of operating deficits and worsening financial position over time, as Angela ran through previously. In essence, there'll be insufficient funds for essential maintenance and renewal of community assets. There'd be an ongoing decline in the quality of the local infrastructure. Council may be forced or to pursue other means of cost-cutting measures or revenue-raising initiatives to address the decline in infrastructure. This may include reducing services, increasing user fees, and possibly selling assets to redirect funds towards other critical infrastructure. However, these measures are unlikely to be adequate to address the infrastructure funding gap. So on average, based on this option, it's about a $52 increase or a $1 per week per rateable resident, including the rate peg, including PEG. So from the perspective of the infrastructure backlog, in relation to this option, there's a current backlog of $227 million. Without an injection of funds, it's projected over the next 10 years or so that to grow to an estimate of about $325 million. So in summary, based on this option, as you can see that the asset classes of footpath buildings, parks and recreational services, stormwater drains, and curb and gutter and other structures, without an injection of funds, they will continue to deteriorate, become unusable, not provide the quality of service that the residents of Ku-ring-gai deserve and expect. And there will just be a continual deterioration of how those assets perform and become, and become unsafer over time. With roads, traditionally roads have been managed and resourced quite well across local government areas, and that is the case with Ku-ring-gai. With stormwater, under this option, you could see what some of our current assets look like with regards to stormwater. More than 40% of the network is in an unsatisfactory condition, which includes blockages, joint failures, pipe displacements, and cracking. Should there be no injection of funds, these will continue to deteriorate, causing potential localized flooding and impact on homes and private businesses. There's the potential of more potholes and sinkholes and subsidence, which will lead to increased road repairs. With buildings, you can see a couple of examples there of generally what most of our public amenities look like. Council's got about 300 buildings with amenity blocks, libraries, community halls, and childcare centres. In 2023-24, we engaged an independent consultant who undertook a comprehensive review of our building portfolio. They found that most of the buildings were in a poor condition and not fully functional, and again, not to the standard that one would expect for a community like Ku-ring-gai. And about 53% of the buildings needed some sort of refurbishment, demolition, or rebuild. Under this option, there would be insufficient funds to undertake any significant improvement works to that asset class. Same with recreational facilities. This includes parks, sport fields, tennis courts, and other recreational facilities, including the aquatic centre. Our long-term financial plan shows a very significant shortfall in funding to renew these assets. Again, the impact on these assets is that they would continue to deteriorate and not offering the experience that one expects, and not offering the opportunity for obviously people to take up and use those facilities to the best that they could possibly be. Same with our footpaths. There is a current backlog of $6.3 million, and that is increasing. About 20% of our footpaths are expected to transition into an unsatisfactory condition within the next decade, stating the obvious that as footpaths deteriorate, they become less accessible. The performance and the efficiency for pedestrians is simply not there, and they become unsafe as well. Option 1, the St. Ives Indoor Sports Centre, that's currently in construction. That's a partnership with the New South Wales Government. Council has allocated $13.5 million towards this project. Under this option, Council will be repaying the loan will need to come from general revenue, other diminishing funding available, and other infrastructure renewal. So option 2, this is the renew infrastructure. This is a 22% rate increase to boost infrastructure renewal across all our asset classes, building, stormwater, recreational facilities, footpaths, and to fund the St. Ives Sports Centre. So the 22% rate increase in this option is inclusive of a 3% rate peg, which will potentially generate $16.5 million in additional annual revenue. That revenue, as you can see on the screen, there's a breakup of how that can be distributed amongst the asset classes. So buildings, there'd be an additional $6.7 million to spend annually. Stormwater, an additional $5 million. Recreational facilities, $1.5 million. And footpaths, $940,000. This would go towards servicing the St. Ives Indoor Sports Centre loan of about $1.46 million, up until we reach the maximum or the amount that is at loan of $13.5 million. So from an average, the impact per ratepayer is about $378 or $7.27 per week, including the PEG. With regards to our stormwater and drainage assets, we would have the capacity to undertake a lot more work and improve this asset class. So we can fix approximately 7 times more stormwater pipes each year. So we can go from repairing 900 meters of pipes to approximately 7 kilometers of pipe. And we can also undertake curb or drainage pit inlets from about 30 to 250 annually. Council has got a program of relining the pipes, which renews the pipes or the condition of the pipe without the need of excavation and replacing the pipe. Where that is possible, that there is also be funded as part of an annual and ongoing program. So buildings under this option will give us the opportunity to improve or upgrade more buildings than what we do at the moment. At the moment, we have an average of upgrading or doing some major significant or repair works to at least 2 buildings per year. Under this option, we would be able to do an estimated 8 buildings per year, subject to what needs to be done on those buildings. So upgrades would prioritise the safety, they provide a better user experience, improve the structural integrity, and bring those buildings up to a more modern day standard. The examples that we've got shown there, the Roseville Tennis Pavilion, what it used to look like and what it looks like now, and Samuel Kin Oval down at the bottom, what it used to look like and what it looks now. So they're just some typical examples of what could be possible with some injection of funds. Footpaths, this is very important for our community for a number of reasons. Accessibility, to provide pathways, safe pathways for our residents to move around and provide better connectivity across the area. So at the moment, we construct about 2.9 square kilometres of footpath. With an injection of funds, we'll be able to get to about 6.5 square kilometres of footpath. We would prioritise the renewal so that we get to the poorest footpaths earlier than what we would normally get to. And like I said, it's just a better, safer and more accessible network across the LGA. Recreational facilities. Again, an injection of funds in this asset class would improve the condition of our playing fields and generally our sporting assets or recreational assets. We would be able to potentially rejuvenate some playing fields per year, more than what we currently do at the moment, which adds to the opportunity of sporting groups and community groups and general users of our facilities to have a better experience and a safer field to play on. The St. Ives Indoor Sports Centre, as I said, is currently funded by a loan. This option would go towards funding that to the tune of $1.46 million to service that loan up until the loan is repaid. So option 3, this is the renew and enhance infrastructure. This is a 29% rate increase to deliver what I just spoke about in option 2, plus additional upgrades to recreational facilities and footpaths, as well as new footpaths and other infrastructure. So as I said, this is a 29% increase, including a assumed 3% rate pegging. And this has the potential to raise $22.6 million annually in funds that we can reinvest into our asset classes. So in addition to what I just spoke about in option 2, this option could potentially provide an extra $600,000 per year for recreational facilities. It could potentially provide $3.8 million in annual funding for new footpaths and $1.7 million per year for other infrastructure upgrades, such as works to our traffic and transport network and other priorities which are yet to be determined. Based on this scenario, Council's infrastructure backlog would reduce from $227 million to $174 million in about over the next decade or so, and that's a significant decrease of about 23%. So the financial impact per resident or residential ratepayer is about $499 per year, or $9.60 per week, including the rate peg. So as I said, with this option, we'd be able to accelerate the delivery of our footpath program. So at the moment, we do about 12 to 14 streets per year. We would be able to get that to around 40 streets per year. So that's quite a significant jump and an acceleration of what we could deliver. We, at the moment, forecast that we will be able to build at least one footpath on a side per street, and that'll take us to about the year of 2045. On current funding levels, it's about the year of 2082. With the injection of funding, we think we can forecast that we can bring that back down to 2045. So recreational facilities. Under this option, council can spend an additional $600,000 and invest that in upgrading our recreational facilities. And as I said before, that will go a long way into producing something that looks like the bottom photo as opposed to the top photo, which is an improved maintenance or rejuvenation regime on our playing fields, providing a lot more opportunity for our community to use those fields at a better standard. Other infrastructure works under this option. This option will provide about $1.7 million annually for other infrastructure works. An example of that would be the possibility of implementing traffic and pedestrian safety programs or projects that aren't currently funded. That is just an example, but obviously as we go along this process, we'd be able to develop a few more projects and programs that we can put out for consideration. So option 4 is the renew, enhance and expand infrastructure option. So this is a 33% rate increase to deliver the infrastructure renewals under option 3, plus additional other infrastructure, and fund the construction and operation of the Marion Street Theatre. So this 33% is inclusive of a 3% rate peg and has the potential to generate $26.3 million annually for reinvestment into those asset classes that I just spoke about. So over and above what I just discussed in option 3, there would be an additional $700,000 per year for traffic works and other infrastructure. And there'd be an almost $3 million, $2.8 million annually to service loan repayments for what could potentially be done at Marion Street Theatre. So on average, this option is about $568 increase per year, or $10.92 a week, including the peg-in. So as I said, this option includes work that can be done or may be done on the Marion Street Theatre. What we've got on the screen there is an artistic impression of what a new or a refurbished Marion Street Theatre can look like. The venue has been closed since about 2013, given its condition for a number of reasons. There is the potential that with this funding that we could fund a almost just over $30 million loan to construct the venue, plus the ongoing annual expenditure to operate that venue. So once the loan is repaid in about 2045-46, any surplus funds generated by this option can go back into other infrastructure renewal projects. So I know that's been a lot to take in. This slide here attempts to summarize what I just spoke about in terms of options and the funding generated by those options into one table. I won't go through that individually, but it is a nice summation and compares the options and what asset classes that increased annual investments can do to each one of those asset classes. So I spoke about this roughly with each scenario. This is the average impact on residential rates per option. You can see that option 1 and the applicable annual impact is $52. The total increase is $52 per year. Option 2, which is the renewal infrastructure, it's a total increase of $378 per year. That includes the 3% rate pegging. Option 3 is the renew and enhance infrastructure. So it's a total increase of $499, which includes the $52 per year, or without that, it's $447 as a SRV increase. And option 4 is the renew, enhance, and expand infrastructure. That's an increase of $516 over and above the assumed 3% peg rate, which totals about $568 per year as an impact on the current rates. So now I'll just hand back over to Angela to go through the next few slides.
Thank you, Peter. The next few slides are about financial hardship and pensioner rebates. So Council does recognise that some people may have difficulty in paying their rates, and we will obviously address that. We currently have a hardship policy which outlines the steps and processes that Council will consider when people do suffer from financial hardship or have difficulty paying their rates. We will be reviewing this policy in the very near future and make sure that the policy remains fair and reasonable and accessible to people in genuine financial need. We, as Council, also provide financial assistance to eligible pensioners by reducing their rates, and this includes a statutory concession of up to $250. And in addition to that, we provide a voluntary concession which makes up about 8.5% of total rates and charges, and this is an additional concession of on average $146 per year. As to next steps, our community engagement will continue until 31st of August. We are hoping to get a lot of feedback from community on that until then. At its October meeting, Council will consider this feedback and may decide on a preferred rate increase option. We will also re-exhibit our Council's long-term financial plan and delivery program operational plan to reflect the preferred option. As I mentioned earlier, any rate increase above the rate peg would need to be approved by IPART, which will conduct its own investigation as well as its own exhibition process in early 2026. Will, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angela. And yes, we've had some questions coming through. So I will just go through them as they were received. So Marge, was the first off the rank at 628. So Council's sudden interest in an infrastructure backlog is just coincidental with the state government's policy of letting the developers loose in Ku-ring-gai. David, do you want to address that one?
Thank you, Will. Council has been concerned about the backlog for some years. It's not a new concern of ours, and the backlog relates to deficits of the past, I guess, of current and past ratepayers. But it is fair to say that if there are increasing population as a result of increased housing, there will be increased demands on the community as well.
Thank you, David. Marge, another one, 631. Is there a list of works that you say needs to be done? Where are these works situated, and can ratepayers access this list? Anyone else? Anyone got an answer for that one? Peter, do we have a list of this that's available?
Thank you. Well, I was trying to find my buttons to unmute myself.
No worries.
At the moment, we have some prelim lists across the various asset classes. They are in some priority. However, those lists can't be finalised until we settle on the various options so that we can firm up those lists according to what funds become available. In any case, the location of projects that will be funded by an SRV, they will be exhibited as part of council's, delivery program or operational plan in the second part of we think 2026. And
Thank you.
the second quarter of 26. Sorry. Not the
Okay,
second
great.
quarter.
And Angela, I was just going to suggest, Angela, if you just stop sharing your screen and then people can see everybody a bit clearer. That's great. Thank you. Joey is asked a question. Your second point regarding cost shifting from the key financial challenges, you state that responsibilities are pushed onto councils. So how is it then fair for council to push the cost onto ratepayers? We are not getting a refund from the state or federal government. Does anyone have a response to Joey's question? It is kind of a comment as well.
Yeah, thanks, Will. Look, it is a concern that there is cost shifting from the state government onto councils, and the industry association, Local Government New South Wales, do lobby the government to point out that it's not fair to cost shift onto local government.
Okay. Thank you, David. Des, you make comparison of land increase to increase in rates. I find the comparison odd. The increase in land values does not equate to increase in earnings as such for the residents. It is a dead asset. So explain this comparison.
Thanks, Will. Look, it is the case. Obviously, the value of someone's property doesn't directly relate to how much income that they get on an annual basis. However, it does there is a correlation between residential land values and socio-economic advantage. We also showed a different slide that compared rates to average household income, which I think probably demonstrates that point more directly.
Right, thank you. Joey asks a question. Initially, it starts on Pacific Highway between Ryde Road and Telegraph Road. There are so many potholes. It has been repaired multiple times, but it continues to develop. Some occurs within 3 months of repair. What is council doing to improve the quality of the infrastructure? Projects, repairs like the example above show poor value for money. What are the deliverables of this rate increase proposal? Is it easy to say better infrastructure? I would appreciate the definition of better. Well, Pacific Highway is not actually a council road. That's maintained by the state government. But the second point to your question, Peter, you may want to address that one.
Better infrastructure, well, that's quite broad, but with respect to how we rate our assets, they go from good down to very poor. So better is somewhere that improves the asset from what it is at the moment, which is generally in the unsatisfactory or poor condition, up to at least a good condition.
Great, thank you. There's another question. The number of staff per X residence is useful. However, a missing stat in this regard is the average cost of staff per comparable average cost of staff in other councils. So I think that's saying how do wages in Ku-ring-gai compare? Who would like to take that one?
Thanks, Will. Look, that stat is not available on the Office of Local Government Comparisons, but we do know simply from our benchmarking in job ads, etc., that we're comparable to other councils. We're certainly not higher. Another one of our indicators that was part of the presentation is our operating expenditure per capita, and overall we're at the low end for that as well. So that relates to a significant part of our cost being labour.
Great, thank you. There's another question. To arrive at these assumptions, did you have an inventory of assets and assess the priority based on risk, urgency, return on investment, etc.? Surely not all are equally bad. Who would like to take that one?
Peter might jump in, but I will just say that we do, as Peter mentioned, yes, we do have a very detailed list of our assets by segment and by condition. So we do analysis and reflect that in our asset management strategy. So all our assets are categorized in, like Peter mentioned, in a very poor, good, satisfactory, good, a very good condition. So we do have a program of works and prioritize this based on risk, and safety, and and we report that in our asset management strategy as well as long-term financial plan.
Great, thank you. Matthew has asked, how has the increased volume of ratepayers in Ku-ring-gai through development of multi-dwelling residences affected income and funding of the discussed items? So the increase in population and income.
Thanks, Will. The increased population in past years has provided some additional income, but the growth rate of population has been relatively low. And also in the past, the additional dwellings has not equated to a proportional increase in rates revenue just because of the way the rates capping has worked.
Great. Okay, thank you. Marge has asked, you spend $318.99 of my rates on cultural programs. Why don't you adopt the solution of just addressing core responsibilities like rubbish collection and looking after the physical environment instead of charging me more? So the classic question is, why do we spend money on cultural programs?
Thank you. Well, council provides a wide range of services. It's not really ever been the case that councils have only provided roads, rates and rubbish. And priorities differ between our residents, and there's very many people who have a high priority for cultural programs and community programs. But thank you for that feedback. Everyone's welcome to put forward their views about our priorities.
Just in addition to that, we have engaged with community on our community strategic plan as well as our delivery program operational plan. So I think cultural facilities were part of what community wanted. So we had to make sure that we include that in our future strategies.
Great, thank you. Marge asked another question about how much did you spend on the independent consultant? Now, I don't know which independent consultant Marge is referring to, so maybe Marge could be more specific in that question later on. So we'll just move on to Joey. The projects presented are projects. They are one-off costs, which surely less than the proposed rate increase ongoing. How can the council justify the ongoing base rate increase of such a large amount? When projects start, such as the St Ives Indoor Sports Centre, a funding resource should have been secured. How was this deficit missed in the planning and now ratepayers have to carry?
Thank you, Will. The funding was not missed. So it was an opportunity, this project, to deliver 2 additional indoor sports courts, which are in very short supply in the local government area, and to join up with 2 existing courts on the school grounds. So it was an opportunity that was available at that time. Council decided to borrow the funds as its main funding source, and at that time identified that it would most likely have to come from an increase in rates in the future. In the absence of an increase in rates, then it will just have to come from some other area of council's expenditure, which would need to be reduced. While I'm speaking, Will, I might just add in relation to the cultural costs that were mentioned in a previous question. My understanding is that those costs actually include the cost of running our libraries as well. So that may not have been understood by the person who asked the question.
Yep. Okay, great. And actually the same, Marge has asked a similar question, but this is about sporting facilities. She says the photos show changes to ovals. These seem unnecessary. And I suspect, Marge, that they may be unnecessary to you, but they may be necessary, particularly through the feedback that we've got in the development of our plans for the future. There is significant demand and we do have to fund that. So just moving on to Des, another question. I don't understand the need for permanent SRV rate when the stormwater drains, footpaths and buildings are not infinite. Surely a time will come when all renewals have been done. For example, I have my house, which also needs renewals and repairs. But if money is spent on doing, say a repair to a certain part of the house, it does not mean I have to do it every year. These are prioritized. Council should also do the same. I object to a permanent increase. I need to see the full list of assets that are considered poor and how much is needed. And I suspect this might be in our asset management plan, but Angela or David, you may choose to answer that one. So
I'll have a go, and then
Okay.
Peter can help.
Peter, yeah.
Look, our backlog on stormwater is a lot higher than what we have even reflected in this increase in rates. The stormwater, just fixing the pipes, and it's such a large increase to the cost of council. So we have, again, we have reviewed in detail the condition of our stormwater, and we have identified that over time, as you fix some pipes that are in condition very poor, then others come along that are in satisfactory and good condition and new. So that's a rolling cycle that we need to make sure that we have funding to provide and not leave it to generations to then catch up later on. So this is what we have been reflecting in our asset management strategy and ongoing funding to make sure that we the stormwater as an asset class is in a good to very good or new condition, so that we don't have to come back to ratepayers and say we need another rate rise to fix the aging stormwater.
Great. I think what you're saying there is a rolling program of renewal on an ongoing basis. Peter, do you have anything to add to that one?
I've just got one thing to add to that. Every asset class has a useful life or a serviceable life. So, and they vary across the asset class related on the location, the specific use, etc. So it is a bit of a rolling program that as the assets reach or are reaching the end of their serviceable life, that we get to them before they get to the conditions that they're currently in.
Great, thank you. Now, Joey has asked, can I ask what consultation was done for the Marion Street Theatre? And reflecting my question above, was this done as a loan rather than outright secured funding scheme? Wouldn't this just drive up us to further rate increases in the future? This is non-essential compared to other essentials you've listed, like stormwater pipes. Now, we don't have a loan for Marion Street Theatre at the moment, Joey. Angela, do you have any views on this, or David?
Thank you, Will. So there has been consultation, quite a lot of consultation in prior years about the Marion Street Theatre. I do note that the original theatre was closed in 2013 after about 40 years of operation. And since that time, the restoration of the theatre has been in our planning documents, our budgets, our delivery program, all the way through by successive councils that supported the project. As for whether we should borrow or fund it all up front, the fact of the matter is we don't have enough funding up front, and it's a legitimate way to operate, to borrow money and pay it off over future years as the ratepayers and residents use the facility, such as
Thanks, David. Matthew, are there plans to implement an accountability scheme to ensure what ratepayers commit to paying in additional rates is injected into the proposed works? For example, implementing a transparent reporting system available to ratepayers to view what specifically council is working on each year, rather than the current very high-level reporting.
Yes, I can take that one. So we are required by IPART as a condition to transparently report to community, but also report back to IPART on the funds that we have raised. So we are doing currently that. We will also transparently list all the projects through our budgeting process and the integrated planning and reporting through framework, as well as reporting our annual report on works that have been delivered and funded from a special rate variation.
Okay, thanks. Joey's made another comment. I would prefer an additional option, one without any expansion, but purely focusing on essentials, stormwater and roads. Additional infrastructure such as the St Ives Sports Park or the theatre should all be stopped until essentials are served. To quote Tony Jones, I'll take that as a comment. Des has got another question. I believe there is an option between 1 and 2. If council can identify areas that need attention based on condition risk, return on investment, estimated increase of revenue from new housing policy, looking at efficiencies. Again, I think that's really a comment. Kanan, I don't understand how an infrastructure backlog of this magnitude has been allowed to build up. Why has an SRV not been introduced in earlier years instead of a steep 19% increase now? Angelo, Dave?
Thank you, Will.
Okay.
The issue of increasing rates is always a sensitive one, and councils, not just our council, but all are concerned about increasing rates and the impact on ratepayers. So I think there's a general reluctance to increase rates above the rates cap. The rates cap itself is also another reason why councils have not been able to fund their infrastructure and other services adequately. And I also note that council some years ago did have a special rates variation just to fix roads. And as was noted earlier in the presentation, roads aren't in too bad a shape due to that special variation. But unfortunately, many of our other assets are perhaps at the same time reaching the end of their useful life. A lot of these assets have been able, since they were built, to exist reasonably, but things that were all built, say, 50 years ago have come to the end of their useful life around about this time. So that's part of the reason. So previous generations have been able to not spend money because they were still within their useful life, but now we've reached the end for many of them.
Thanks, David. Angela, are you going to add something?
I just wanted to add that the cost of infrastructures we know have increased so much in the last 10 years. We also required as councils to revalue our asset classes every 3 years. In fact, the external auditors are asking us to do it every year. So that means that we need to allow, so due to increased cost, depreciation on all of these assets increases as well. And that means that we need to fund that. So that's also added to our challenges, increased depreciation over time from increased revaluation of assets.
Okay, thank you. Marge has got 2 questions. You say you have a high emergency services levy. Your information is general. What's the actual amount? I don't know if we can answer that now. Perhaps it's something we can take on notice. Any views on that? Just take that one on notice and I'll look into that one. Okay. Marge also asks, no, you're saying there is a backlog. You must know what the works are. What works you do is irrelevant. I think that's a comment, Marge. I'll read that again. No, you say there is a backlog. You must know what the works are. What works you do is irrelevant. Okay, I think we've acknowledged that there is a backlog, and that we need to do something about that. Greg and Lisa, I think David's just answered this one, but infrastructure requirements must have been known for ages, with some infrastructure never being maintained. Why has an SRV not been lodged previously? Basically, the current residents are being financially hitting for undercharging previous residents. Also, wasn't this shortfall picked up in the audits? I think we've kind of covered that. Does anyone else want to add anything to that one?
I will just add to the audits that, yes, we report this on an annual basis. The external auditors do not audit in particular backlogs. However, they do look at our asset management strategies. So this has been transparently reported in all our documents and reports.
Great. Thank you, Angela. Des has come back. The response to the second question, do you have a list of the assets? Shows how the project has been handled. What should happen first is to identify the assets based on the current conditions, the risk, etc. This is a repeat of a point I have been making. I don't know if anyone's got any comments on that. It's more of a comment, I believe. Okay, I'll take that as a comment. There is a very serious stormwater drainage issue in front of my house. And according to the survey from council staff, there is a defect in the gutter and curb, which are built by council back at that time, but the staff asked to fix it at our own costs. So how do you make sure the extra charge will be used properly on the right places? So this is a question about how do we know that our money is going to be spent in the right places? What have we got in place to assure that happens? Peter?
Well, I can't talk about that specific property, but
Of course.
if the resident wants to drop us a line or a separate email, we'll look into the site specifics. But we will assign the funding that becomes available against our priorities based on the current condition, what the network or what the asset category class requires, and the risks associated with not doing the work.
Okay, and another question, Greg and Lisa, you mentioned that development costs are not covering development income. Why is this so? With all the proposed development, are current residents funding infrastructure shortfall?
Yes, Will, it is the case that development costs are subsidised. So for development applications, the fees that council can charge are set by the state government, and they don't cover the full cost of assessing the applications. Similarly, the contributions that are paid, referred to as development contributions, when people build new dwellings, they are usually capped as well. And councils across New South Wales all agree that they do not cover the full cost of the infrastructure required by the incoming population.
Okay. Marge asks another question. I don't understand your link between wealth in the area and rates amount collected. Why should these two necessarily correlate? Don't know who'd like to take that one. Is there a reason why these should correlate? Almost a philosophical question, I would say.
Yes. Look, it's probably related to affordability. So as part of applying for a special rates variation, councils need to address affordability. Now, as a general comment, if there is higher wealth in an area, you would expect higher rates would be more affordable. Noting though that our rates actually per capita are not higher than most places, or in fact are down at the lower end.
Thanks, David. Ray, option 1 is 3%. Option 2 is 22. The gap is too big. Is there other option between 3 and 22? Can the council provide more options like 10, 15 and 20 with details?
Look, option 1 is really a base case scenario that if that the rates would be increased by whatever IPART sets as the rate peg. Why there's not lower? Like, we have done very detailed analysis around our infrastructure, and we've identified that perhaps what we are suggesting would actually get to a better outcome and would decrease our backlog faster. 10% or less than 20% is not sufficient to just bring back the backlog as well as to catch up. So I think through our detailed analysis, we've identified that perhaps a 22% would be a reasonable and perhaps get the positive and best outcome for our assets in that scenario.
Great. And I think Gail's asked a very similar question. In the proposed options, there is a large increase from 3 to 22. Is there a case for an intermediate increase? So I think you just covered that one, Angela. Marge has just confirmed that the consultant with whom you employ to assess the backlog of works, while we do have a very we have a procurement process which is audited and very solid. So I don't think we'd be able to share those numbers with you. I don't know if anyone else has something to add with that. No. Okay. No, they're commercial in confidence, but yes, we do have a fairly rigid process of procurement which is audited. So Wendy, the potential TOD and rezoning will definitely cause heavy burdens to current infrastructures. Should the developers and the state government take responsibility for that? David may have a view.
Yeah, thank you, Will. It is council's view that the state government and developers should contribute to cover those costs, or at least go a long way towards it. Council has made numerous submissions to the government making that exact point. Unfortunately, to date, we've not received satisfaction in that regard. So most of the funding will need to be found by council itself to fund the requirements of the incoming population.
Okay, thank you. Faith, given the huge number of multi-dwellings pushed by New South Wales government and to some extent the council, why aren't property developers hit with high fees to enable improvements to infrastructure? Surely the additional dwellings are going to seriously impact our infrastructure. Of course, since the New South Wales governments are pushing for the increase in dwellings, why aren't they funding the necessary infrastructure? I think David just covered that one. I think we probably like them to, but unfortunately they don't. Anything to add to that, David?
No, that's exactly it, Will. You summarised it very neatly.
Okay,
we
great.
would love it if they would provide more funding, but unfortunately they don't. Look, the incoming the developers will be making some contributions, but we don't believe they'll be adequate.
Right. Greg and Lisa, given the apparent dire financial position, have you considered selling any non-core assets?
We have. So in the past, council has looked at selling assets. An example is bowling clubs. Now, we do have 2 bowling clubs that council considered selling, but in the end decided not to. Now, with the incoming population, the need for open space will be greater than ever. So in those particular examples, the opportunity to sell those are really not available now because open space will be needed more.
Okay, great.
Council does have other assets, such as in its town centres, and it will be looking at that in the future, depending on what happens with the housing plans. And those assets probably will be needed to develop community facilities in the town centres.
Great, thank you. Des has got another question. Please expand on the response to my question on permanent versus temporary SRV. Your response talked about ongoing maintenance and asset have a lifetime. So from what I have heard, council has not done any of these renewals for some years. Now, if these have lasted that many X years without attention and now we need huge funding, I'm really struggling to understand this permanent rate increase. Having worked in a corporate world, this is quite strange to me. Who would like to take that one?
Thank you, Will. Look, the reason it's permanent is because the backlog is so large that it will take many years to address the shortfalls.
Okay. Joey has asked, hypothetically, let's say the council receives the funding it requires from the rate increase and has the funding. What is a long-term financial plan of the council? I.e., is there an option to invest in future renewals rather than expanding, continue to build? This will ensure a more sustainable future with the infrastructure we have maintained rather than building new infrastructure that cannot be maintained in the long run.
Yeah, so I would just say that our asset management strategy and perhaps the special rate variation of a part of it is funding existing assets and renewal on existing assets. So we do prioritize fixing our current assets that we currently have and renewing those before upgrading or bringing on new assets, because new assets obviously bring more maintenance costs, more depreciation. So our long-term financial plan, as well as the asset management strategy, does highlight the renewal, a renewal ratio, which looks at how we're renewing our existing assets, but also makes a distinction between the upgraded assets and new assets that we're bringing on board, and what the financial impact on those is.
Okay, great. Kanan has asked another question. If assets were reaching end of useful life, then shouldn't a reserve have been built up in previous years through smaller rate increases? Our rate increases are limited by the rate peg. I don't know if Angela or David have any more comments on that. No. I think that was answered earlier in the sense that it's always tricky to raise rates to pay for these things, and people don't like to pay for them. Are there specific initiatives to reduce costs? Kanan asks, why should we assume that all rate increases are permanent? This comes down to efficiencies, I guess. Angela or David, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, thank you, Will. There are initiatives to reduce costs. We're undertaking a rolling program of service reviews. We've undertaken numerous reviews over the years and identified ways to contain our costs. We have, as was shown in the slides earlier, we've contained our costs through really tight budgeting over many years, to the point where the council's operating costs are much lower relative to most other councils. Our staff numbers are at the lower end compared to other councils. Our rates per capita is below average. So absolutely, council needs to continue to look for efficiencies and productivity improvements. However, the opportunity to achieve savings is not of the magnitude that could fund all of these infrastructure improvements.
Right. Okay, thank you. And Greg and Lisa asked a very similar question about the asset management strategy. I don't understand how we are still in a poor financial position. You have the useful life of assets. You should have been putting aside funds earlier to cover this. And I think that one's already been addressed. Des, I'm sorry if I have not hitherto looked at the website. Is this information about detailed analysis of assets, etc., available for review and study? So is our asset management plan, etc., available?
Yes, so our long-term financial plan as well as our asset management strategy are available on the website for review.
Yep. Okay. Enjoy, Des. Marge, your avoidance of answering my question is not good enough. How much did you spend on the independent consultant who you employed to assess the infrastructure work? Again, as I said, this is commercial in confidence, but as I said, we do have a rigorous and audited procurement process. So we do always seek value for money. Jeff, is the proposed increase intended to be a one-off, or is it proposed to increase the level of rates forever at a higher level?
I think the purpose of the current proposed rate increase is a permanent. It will be applied once. Should that be approved from July next financial year, and then will stay permanently in the rate base. And after that, the residents will pay the usual rate peg annually. And there are, just to clarify, on the engagement portal, there are tables that reflect that increase and a cumulative increase over 5 years for information.
Okay, thank you. And Des, the last question on the list that in front of me at the moment, I think it's more of a suggesting that we should keep extending temporary increases as needed and not impose a permanent increase. I think we'll take that one as a comment. Now, so this is your chance. We have no more questions in the question box. So if you want to type anything else or got any other questions, you can certainly do that. You can also come and see us in the library next Saturday on the 2nd, 10 till 12 at Gordon Library. We also have a public forum on the 13th of August and another drop-in session at St Ives Shopping Centre on the 28th of August. Kanan has another question, so I'll just go to that one. Kanan, are there any cost estimates on infrastructure as our climate changes? So I think we have mentioned that in some of our materials. Angela?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Are there any cost estimates on infrastructure as our climate changes? I know we've mentioned disasters and things like that. I'm not sure if we've covered climate change.
We haven't specifically covered climate change, but we do have a projection of additional costs as a result of storms, flooding, and we have experienced that in the past. So we do have a forecast outlined in the long-term financial plan. It might not be a specific line item, but we do allow for additional costs from those events. So yeah, and we are reviewing this annually to make sure that we allow enough, sufficient costing there to cover those costs.
Okay. And a question here, I think this is about Norman Griffiths. Has there been an inquiry into mismanagement of the changing natural grass into artificial turf at the West Pymble Oval by Centennial Park? That's Norman Griffiths, I believe. David, would you like to take that one?
Thank you, Will. Yes, Council is undertaking an independent review into the project, and at the same time, a plan is being prepared in order to complete the project, and that will be reported to Council in the very near future.
Okay, so we'll keep an eye out for Norman Griffiths' progress. So if nobody else has any questions, I think we can look at closing the meeting. Now, I have recorded this session today, and we will be placing it on the website. It may be a little dodgy at the beginning because my computer decided to stop recording, so apologies for that, but that will be going up tomorrow. We also have some upcoming events, as I described earlier. Please have a look at our website and have your say through the survey. Joey has a comment. Thank you for all your time today. I don't think I made your job easy tonight, but appreciate the effort and your ongoing dedication and service to the residents of Ku-ring-gai. Looking forward to a solution. Well, Joey, we all appreciate your positive comments and we appreciate your thanks. So I think on that note, I will close the session and thank everybody for coming. As I said, we have events coming up. Please visit our website, have your say through our survey. Yes, we look forward to hearing from you and we'll keep you informed as the project progresses. Thanks very much, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.